Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's conversation, A Better Workplace Experience for Everyone, Lessons from the Neurodiverse. Here at Modo, we believe that a truly great workplace experience is one that brings people together, fosters connection, and removes the friction that holds teams back. That's why we build technology that enables transparency, collaboration, and a sense of community, because when people feel empowered and engaged, they can do their best work anytime. We're proud to underwrite this important conversation today as part of our ongoing commitment to amplifying the voices of change makers in our community. These webinars are designed to spark ideas, share fresh perspectives, and help us all build a better, more inclusive experiences, whether you're in HR, workplace strategy, corporate real estate, communications, or anyone passionate about shaping the future of work. Now, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce two of the most insightful voices in workplace experience, Kate Lister, President of Global Workplace Analytics, and Kay Sargent, Director of Thought Leadership at HOK and author of Designing Neuroinclusive Workplaces. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat or the question box. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for Modo for hosting this. And welcome, Kay.
Well, how are you this afternoon, Kate?
I'm good. Kay and I have known each other for 10, 15 years maybe. And I don't think I've ever had the pleasure of having her complete attention for a whole hour. So I'm delighted to do this today. And here's why you want to listen to this woman. She's got 40 years of experience, and her true passion is about using design to transform the where and the how of work. She's practicing licensed certified interior designer and a director of thought leadership. I like to consider that the chief big thinker interior at HOK. They're a global architectural and design firm with 1,700 people, 26 offices on 3 continents. In her day job, Kay leads project teams that solve business and organizational problems related to real estate, business process, strategic planning, workplace strategy, change management, and designing for inclusion. And if all that isn't enough, plus raising 5 children as a single mom, she managed to find a new way to keep herself busy by writing this book, Designing for the Neuroinclusive Workplace. It's a groundbreaking book. I read the whole thing, and it tackles the challenges the neurodiverse individuals face in the built environment, why and how we should address those, and what it can teach us about designing workplace experience for everyone. Welcome, Kay. Thank you to Modo for this opportunity. So let's start with some definitions. Neurodiverse. Let's tackle that one first. What does it mean?
We kind of all process things differently, and we all kind of think differently. And neurodiversity is really kind of a natural occurring way of the way that people are processing information. And it's kind of their unique way of whether it's your thinking, how you feel about things, etc. It can include people that are on the autistic spectrum. It can be people that have ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia. And when we started this research, probably 8 years ago, the numbers were considered to be like 1 in 8 people were considered to be neurodivergent. And most people didn't really know what that meant. Now, I think most people are very familiar with that term for a variety of reasons. But right now, it's considered that about 1 in 5 people is to be considered to be neurodivergent. And I actually think that that's wrong. From our latest research and from the studies that are coming out now, I think this is much more prevalent in our society. I think it just went grossly underdiagnosed for a really long time, or people didn't want to come out because of whether it was a stigmatism or they didn't want to be othered or ableism, any of that. But I think people are becoming more and more comfortable. That stigmatism is falling off. And we really kind of think of it now. It's not a deficit. It's a difference. And it's a difference that can actually be very, very beneficial to individuals and to businesses.
We tend to think of it, as something difficult. In fact, it has some benefits.
If you think about the people that are neurodivergent, and if you are, you're in really good company, whether it's Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, a lot of athletes, a lot of artists, a lot of entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, some out-of-the-box thinkers. People that are neurodiverse have an extreme skill set that can be pretty vast. And I think in many, many cases, when they're put in the right situation, they can really, really thrive. But the problem is we often put them in situations where they can't be successful. And what's interesting is in the last few years, the definition of a disability has shifted away from this being a physical condition to it being more of a societal and barriers in the workplace, because we can't necessarily address an impairment that someone might have, but if the built environment and society is accepting and welcoming and enabling, then those people can be really, really successful. If they're not, that's really what causes the problem. And so we're kind of shifting to the social model of disability that's really starting to evolve.
What I like so much about the book, a lot of the stories and the case studies, is that when you look at the things that the neurodiverse need in their environments, there's a big overlap with what the rest of the population needs. The other thing that we're hearing a lot about lately is the workplace experience. And, of course, that's always been important. It didn't just suddenly get important. But I think it's gotten more attention these days as employers are looking to draw people back into the office.
Right. I think it's fascinating that so many of our clients are coming to us and saying, what's that amenity that's going to magically make everybody come back? And I really kind of feel like our industry is being set up for failure. I can design an amazing space. If you don't have the operational side, if there's not people there, et cetera, it's not going to be successful. Hybrid is really kind of much more of an operational model than it is of a workplace solution. But the workplace absolutely plays a role. And I think if I were to ask anybody, like, what do you think the biggest challenges are most people face? Universally, people will acknowledge it's, sound, it's temperature, it's the lighting, all sensory elements. And those things aren't just impacting people that are neurodivergent, it's impacting every single one of us. But what might be annoying or agitating to someone that's neurotypical can be debilitating to someone that's neurodivergent. And we're not really holistically leaning in and addressing that, even though every post-occupancy evaluation will tell us those are the things that are really troubling. So we're not addressing the elements of the built environment. And now let's add on, Kate, that we're being even more overwhelmed. We have the highest rate of burnout, the highest level of teen depression, and the lowest well-being scores we've ever had. And, that some magical amenity isn't going to fix that. So we have to fundamentally think about what the root cause of all that is and really address it much more holistically.
I can't help thinking of Maslow's hierarchy when we talk about all of this. We haven't got the really basic stuff right. Heating, lighting, noise. Those are the stuff at the bottom of the pyramid. And if we can't get past that, we're not going to be thinking about our purpose and autonomy and the role we play in the organization. We're going to be looking for a sweater and a couple of aspirin.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing right now is fundamental psychological safety. If we aren't meeting those basic needs that people have, you can't ever function at a higher level. And anybody that's been through trauma or times of extreme uncertainty, it's incredibly stressful. And you can say that almost all of us have been through instability, and that we've all kind of gone through a little bit of trauma. And now our routine, right, is just totally chaotic. So it's very, very difficult for us to get into a flow where we feel and psychologically safe. And that's really deeply unsettling for a lot of people. Even though it may not be outwardly obvious, it is absolutely adding to the anxiety that everyone is feeling today.
Yeah, absolutely. The return to office move. What of these neurodiverse people? Now they're being called back in, and talk about changing. Every week, every month, leaders are changing what they think, and so there's never this sense of security and safety. And one day you may go to the office and there's nobody else there, and it's nice and quiet. And another day you may go and it's an entirely different experience. And we've put up with this for way too long.
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad that you're bringing this out, and hope that it brings light on the need for everybody.
I think for the last 40 years, we've tried more and more so to design space for the average person doing the average thing. But I defy anybody to tell me who is that average person and what is the average thing that they're doing. And I think what our industry has done is the equivalent of what the fashion industry would do if they basically got together and said, you know what? We want to roll out, fashion. Everybody gets a size 10 unitard, in gray, man or woman, size 20, size 2, whatever, here you go. That's what we're doing in workplaces. We've oversimplified it. And I don't know, I think as humans, we've become more complicated. So we need to stop trying to design for the average. And we need to understand that kind of one size all mentality, it's really one size misfits all.
Yeah, you nailed that.
When we do this right, you should be able to go to a space that has an area for people that really do need more quiet spaces. And there are other people that can't stand that they actually think quiet is creepy and they don't like that and they need that buzziness. Think about all those people that work at a Starbucks, right? They're not going there because it's quiet and it's like, cheap coffee. They're going because they thrive off of that energy of being around other people. And a lot of people need that, right? So we have to create spaces that address all the modalities and all the different types of works that we're doing, but then also enable you to meet your environmental needs, right? And so just want to put this out there. We have a lot for 20, 30 years. We've been talking about activity-based working. It's this notion that you create and provide options and choices, and based on your activity, you choose where you want to sit. But in all honesty, most people that have a choice make a decision based on the environmental factor. And so we really should be talking about environmental based work. I might want to sit in an area that's louder or closer to the window and brighter or has a better view or is near a colleague of mine versus somebody else might choose to sit in a place that is darker because they might be impacted by the light and they want a quieter space. And in every building, there are natural zones that occur, right? I can't design a space that is the perfect temperature for everybody, but the sun moves and so should we. In every building, there are hot spots because they're closer to the window where the sun is on that side of the building that time, and there are quiet spaces. So we've got the technology today to be able to give that kind of information to people to help them make better choices about where they can sit so that the sensory elements that are positively and or negatively impacting them can be better suited to meet their needs versus just sucking it up and dealing with, that loud talker or that glaring light or the overhead that is just annoying to us. But we're not doing that, and we need to.
It just saps your productivity. You cannot tell me that if you're sitting in an environment that's not right for you or that's wrong for you, that you're able to be as productive or effective as you would. And
that affects everybody, right? Not just people that are neurodiverse. It's affecting our mental health, our ability to focus, our productivity, our well-being, our anxiety, our stress, our burnout, all of those things. And we can't say that it's not. So if we want to create spaces where humans, all of us, can function, we need to start addressing this more holistically.
Yeah, and you said you think the number is greater than 20%, but if you also think about factors like age, my hearing isn't as good as it used to be. My multi-processing isn't as good as it used to be.
Changes as you age.
Menopause. Now that was a treat.
Yeah. Our research shows that men tend to have a less extreme reaction to sensory stimulation than women do. And I really want to dig into that more. In some cases, it just might be a lack of awareness about what's going on. It could be their, physical, size, et cetera. But they literally, women and individuals that are non-binary are 5 times as likely to have an acute reaction to something. So we kind of think about, like, you have those people in the middle that are sensory neutral, and then you have hyper, which are sensory avoiders, and hypo individuals that are sensory seekers. They actually need additional stimulation. You think about people with that nervous energy, or all those people with the fidget spinners, or people that need more exciting environments to be able to function and to thrive. We've got to design spaces that accommodate everybody across that spectrum in every aspect of our sensory sense, the senses that are coming at us, whether it's taste, smell, sound, even proximity to individuals and our internal sensations. All of those things are factors.
Talk to me about friction. You talk about that in the book a lot, and it's something I'm particularly interested in as it relates to productivity and performance.
I think it's interesting. There's, what might work for one person doesn't necessarily work for another. And I think we all kind of assume that everybody functions just like we do. And that's not necessarily the case. And I think we need to understand that different people are going to function differently, and we need to meet them where they are, right? I might want to move around the office and not have a dedicated space because I enjoy that ability to do that. Where there are some people that absolutely have to have a dedicated space because too much variety is overwhelming and can literally short circuit them. I don't know anybody that has assigned seats at their dinner table, but yet I'm willing to bet everybody sits in the same spot, right? And you can see that in meetings and things like that. So there's some degree of consistency that just helps us function in the world, because if we had to think about every decision, every second, constantly, it just is overwhelming. So enabling and understanding that people think differently is important. And it's in kind of, this is the double empathy problem, where we assume people function like us. And I will say right now, every single person on the planet has somebody that's just driving them nuts because they don't do it your way, or they think differently, or they process differently.
But there's some sort of intuition that should happen too. I mean, as you say, we don't want to have to make too many decisions. So the designing in a way that is intuitive. The grocery store always comes to mind. I mean, first of all, they know more about me in the grocery store than any workplace will ever know about their people. I mean, there's a reason
Right.
coupons for double chocolate Oreos.
Yes, or all those things at the checkout aisle. Yes, absolutely.
But I mean, they're watching our eye patterns, they're watching our foot patterns. They've been doing that for 10 years. I talked to an architect in retail some years ago and asked him, why are people willing to give that away in the supermarket, but we're not willing to give it away? We get all this big brother-ish when we give it away in the office. And she said something I think is true. Whiff them. What's in it for me? I get the coupon.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's just take this. The workplace, honestly, it's just like the last bastion of everything. If you went into a coma in 2019 and you woke up today, the only thing that you would notice that was any different is basically this whole conversation about work and how we work, et cetera, which probably is long overdue. But if you think about, even the auto industry has a better experience and can adapt more to an individual than we do in the office, where, you get into your car, everything automatically adjusts to you. You get to the office and you're like, where can I plug this in? Like, how do I do that? And we're not creating environments, I think, that are conducive. You go to Disney World, they are tracking, like, where are their high peaks, where are their low peaks, what are your preferences, how do I route you there? We're not doing that in the workplace. And right now, we kind of like Internet of Things 101, where those things in the ceiling are monitoring me for some nefarious reason, right? But when those things in the ceiling are empowering me, then all of a sudden I want to use it. So we have the ability right now with all those sensors to basically say, Kate, welcome to the office. We know that you prefer a more quiet space that's a little bit more dimly lit, off to the side where it's less dense, and you like to sit next to Sam. We recommend that you sit in this part of the building today. What would be more comfortable for you? And in the middle of the afternoon, if it starts heating up or starts getting loud, we've noticed that the temperature has changed and the acoustic level has adjusted. Would you prefer to sit over here where it's cooler and quieter? Right? We're not leveraging this to our benefit. And the second that we get something out of it, we're all in. But if we think we're being monitored, no, we're not good with that.
You remember I'm sure you do, the Deloitte building,
the Edge.
How many years ago was that? I happened to be going through my drawer and I found notes that I took at some conference that was
Yeah.
talking about that innovative building. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's practically what Kay just said. That it can tell your car when you come into the building, and it can route you to parking that's near where your first meeting is, because it knows what's on your calendar. And because you have a presentation this afternoon, it puts you in a room that has the right scent and the right chair setup, and just everything for you.
I mean, it knows your
You weren't
coffee
ready
order
for
when you get into the elevator. It'll say, hey, do you want that latte? We see you're going to the 5th floor. Do you want your latte ready for you? Right? We have the ability to have such a better experience in the workplace, and we're not using it. And I think we need to really think about, how do we take this to the next level to really create better environments and better experiences for everyone.
Well, it's beyond this conversation, but I think the answer is trust. The Edelman trust barometer is at the lowest it's been in terms of employers.
I think that's true. And I think, I think we need to rethink what our kind of agreement is in our contract, right? I think there's a lot of people right now that they feel like, I can't manage you if I'm not watching you, which I think is hysterical, because I think like 90% of online shopping is done between the hours of 9 to 5, right? So just because I see you at your computer doesn't actually mean that you're functioning or working.
Exactly.
But we need to be able to think about, how can we work better?
Yeah. That somebody told me once that in an environment of trust, people assume that what you're doing for them. In an environment where there's not trust, they assume that you're taking something away from them, or you're doing something against them. So, I think that's where it has to start.
Yeah.
I love all of this. Like, it knows what I'm doing. I mean, I want the keyboard to shake when I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, to say, you're not very good at this. And did you know we have 10 vetted contractors who could do this much better than you can?
And that's where artificial intelligence will likely come in. I mean,
Yeah.
people don't want to spend their time doing expense reports, timesheets, administrative stuff that just brings no value to you or the organization. And if artificial intelligence can take over some of that stuff to free us up, it actually could put us into either a new renaissance, where we could actually spend time thinking about like the arts and music and things like that. But we have to shift our mindset. And so I think one of the greatest examples that I love to talk about is, when in the late 1800s, we had all these labor riots that were going on, and people were working really long, hard days, and, kind of had the rise of the robber barons, aptly called. But then Henry Ford invented the assembly line. And when he did that, he had a choice. I can either ratchet up productivity, or I can give something back to my employees, excuse me, and maybe enable them to actually have time to drive a car rather than working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And so he invented the 5-day work week that we have to this day. People at that time thought he was crazy, but he decided to make an investment in society. Now, when we fast forward, when the computer was invented, they anticipated that with the increase in productivity, we would be working 2 days a week by the year 2000. Bill Gates has now just come out and said he thinks ultimately we're going to get there. So, maybe there's hope again. But that didn't happen, because we didn't make an investment in society, and we just ratcheted all that up into the economic engine and profits and profits and profits. Now we have the promise of artificial intelligence that can make us more productive. And the question is, are we just going to sink all that into making like more corporate profits and the divide bigger and bigger? Or are we going to make an investment in people? And if we can get as much done in 4 days as we can in 5, can we make an investment in society that will actually benefit us as humans, not just the corporate economic engine, but us as a society? And I think we're at a critical point where we need to start thinking about those types of things.
Well, I'd love to have a discussion with you about how work should change, work itself, and how AI, if people do spend 80% of their day doing things they hate or are not good at. Imagine if we could just do what we like. Imagine if we knew what was available in the organization.
Right.
Do you know that Kay Sargent just wrote a paper on this? Why are you writing another We don't even know that within the organization. So
Yeah.
I think that's all going to change. We're going to be a lot more skill-based. We're going to be a lot more project-based.
Yeah, okay, so just another random thought here, Kate, as like, and we're just gonna go off to this tangent for a second. I find it really fascinating that if any industry should be forward thinking, it's the design and construction industry, because we are building buildings that stand for 70 years. We're designing spaces that stand 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? Yet we are barely thinking beyond what's happening right now. And most of our clients are still just saying, what's that cool amenity, right? Whatever. Um, to your point, if you want to know how you should be designing the workplace, you have to address the two biggest drivers that are impacting that: work and the workforce. Because how those two things are going to change is going to radically shift how you design the workplace. Yet we're just so micro focused on what's happening now to the workplace that we're negating and not thinking about those other factors that are really driving everything. And so we find ourselves doing a lot more future casting with our clients about projecting out. What are you not thinking about that you should be? And how are things going to shift so that you can make better decisions about your workplace so that it's future ready? It's not going to be future proof. We want the future to come. The alternative would suck, but we need to be ready for it. And I don't think we're thinking in that way yet. Many of our clients.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to agility and being able to make those moves and shifts. Who knew where ChatGPT came out of nowhere, and that's how the rest of the world is going to work.
Just circling back to this, technology can be an amazing enabler for people that are neurodiverse. It's kind of standardized people walking around with a tablet, right? So now if I need a coach or if I need things broken down, that behavior has kind of been normalized. It can help with closed caption. It can help with recording things. I can see something instead of just hearing it, right? So it's been a tremendous boon, but it also is becoming one of the biggest distractors. And you can get sucked down a hole and with technology, it can be really kind of overwhelming. So we have to be really, really careful about how we do that, specifically for people that are neurodivergent and might have, some more challenge with that.
You did a study on one of your own offices that you talk about in the book, and where
Yeah.
you start is with what's the work? What's the work that people are doing?
Yep, absolutely. So we really wanted to understand what are people doing? What are they spending their time? What do we really need to be designing for?
And that's critical. And it's going to be different for every organization. It's going to be different for everyone in the organization.
So if you look at this chart that's up on screen right now, we did a pre and a post assessment, and I didn't go and find the worst space I could. This is an architect's office, right? So it should be pretty well designed. But the farther over to the right, the more important something was, the higher up or down, like the higher up it was, the more satisfied you were. And so you can see we looked at sensory elements and environmental elements. And we had a lot of things that were really important, but they were kind of underperforming in the existing space. This is a mixed population, right? So it is representative. And what we know is in this group, we had about 35% of the individuals in this survey identified as being neurodivergent. It actually changed in the post to 42 because when people took the original assessment, they realized, this sounds familiar, or their kids had just got diagnosed. And so then they went and realized, because this is grossly underdiagnosed in the older generation. You were just that hyper kid that could never sit still. But now there's this wave of midlife diagnoses because people are realizing what they might have expected but never really knew. So we did this. Then they went home for a month, and then they moved into a space that was designed to be neuro-inclusive. And after 3 months, we tested again, and you can see things stayed the same as far as the level of importance, but the level of satisfaction went up significantly. And I don't know about you, Kate. I don't know a single client right now that isn't trying to ultimately crack the nut of how do I get people more engaged, more productive, feeling better, less anxious, less stressed. and more satisfied, so they'll want to be in these spaces, et cetera. So when you can get results like this, it can be pretty significant. Not
Yeah.
only is it good for the person, it's good for the business.
And what was done in between those two periods? Was it, I guess what I'm thinking is, was it expensive? Did it take a long time?
Yeah. So here's the challenge that we have in our industry. So we all know from elementary school that if you're doing a scientific experience, there's one variable, right? You change one thing. But we don't really do that when we renovate a space. We change the lighting, the spacing, the furniture, the colors, like all of it changes. And so we can't say it was the lighting or it was this. I will say the one thing that changed the most significantly between the pre and the post was a little bit more graciousness of space. This whole, let's go back to 2019 when it was all about densification, right? Standardize and densify. I think now we're kind of backing off of that and giving people a little bit more graciousness of space, a little bit more options, a little bit more nuanced spaces, a little bit more hospitality elements to make the spaces feel more human because that's who's occupying them. But there was a variety of factors. And so this space was designed, it had better lighting. It took a lot of the principles. And you talked about one of them, Kate, which I love, legibility, excuse me, where it's easy to navigate a space. It's intuitive. I don't need a bunch of signs. If space is designed well, we can control your movement. We can control how long you stay there. We can control how you feel, right? Think about like McDonald's chairs are designed so that you're comfortable for 15 minutes and then you're out. I don't want you hanging out there all day, right? Starbucks in the beginning was, we want you to sink into this chair and never leave, because who wants to go to a coffee shop that's empty, right? Nobody does. So we need to really understand, what is the purpose of getting people here? What are you trying to achieve? What do you value? And then design it specifically for that. So that's what we did in that second space, really intentionally designed.
Some of the things that you did that I read about, well, one thing in particular, you found that the neurodiverse population and the neurotypical population were very similar in their sensitivity
Yeah.
to certain things.
Yeah, we kind of had this hypothesis that the same things that were probably bothering someone that was neurodivergent were bothering somebody that was neurotypical, but maybe to a slightly lesser degree. It's that whole canary in the coal mine philosophy that what is impacting, you have a canary in the coal mine for a reason, because there's something that's happening that is triggering to let you know this is going to impact everybody else. It's just a matter of time, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, our research of 6 studies showed that when you design for the extreme, you really benefit the mean. It's the same things that are impacting people, but maybe to a slightly lesser degree if you're neurotypical.
And noise was one of those, I think, that there's great commonality between the sensitivity to noise.
Yes, I think anybody could say it's light, temperature, and sound were the 3 biggest factors. Densification and how close you were.
Proximity.
And I absolutely think that's been impacted by COVID. But I think the thing that surprised a lot of people was one of the recommendations, if you're neurodivergent, is, well, go work in a private space or go work from home because you can't handle being in shared space. But what we found is a lot of people don't like being in confined or enclosed space. They can't move, they can't fidget, they feel like they're on display. They might not get the right lighting or the right airflow. Yeah, and so you might prefer to sit in an enclosed space. I might prefer to sit in open space. It's like 40-35, right? Like it's not equal, but it's pretty much equal. And so we kind of have to understand that just because it works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it works for somebody else.
So we see a lot of companies going to unassigned seating. How does that impact the neurodiverse?
For some people, specifically people that can't handle too much variety, and you said earlier, like too much variety can be overwhelming, right? It's that variety anxiety. Some people need routine and structure, and without it, it's like just too much is going on. And so there are certain people that absolutely need a dedicated space just to feel like they have that control. For other people, they might want options and choices. And the challenge I think that we're dealing with right now is if you go to assigned seating, then every desk has to be the same because we have to be equitable and everybody has to have a desk. What we also know is that a lot of those desks are going to sit empty a long part of the day, right? So you got a lot of wasted space. But I don't know a single employer that ever says, hey, Kate, do you have any sensitivities? I don't. So I'm going to assign you to a desk that's open. And let's say I assign you to a desk on a main corridor. People are constantly walking back and forth across from a conference room, and your back is exposed. And you're one of those individuals that just really can't handle that. I literally have sabotaged your ability to be productive before you've even sat down and started to work, right? But
And so you
if
complain about the money it's going to cost to make the environments right, but you just took somebody with $100,000 salary and took 75% of their productivity away.
But if I create a space that has free choice, right? I'm empowering you to act like an adult and decide what you need to do and where you're going to do it best. Then you will naturally navigate to a space. And it doesn't happen all right away because most of us have really, really poor sensory intelligence. And just the example of that is, if I asked you, Kate, about we're going to go to this restaurant, do you have any preference of where we're going to sit? Most people are like, yeah, no. The second you start walking in, you're like, oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to go sit it there. I want to sit there. Like we
Yeah.
instinctively know, but we can't articulate it. So if I put you in an environment where you have choice, you will naturally navigate maybe over a day or two or whatever to a space that feels more comfortable for you. Now, because you've been able to self-select that, you could decide you want to change every day, or you could decide, nope, I'm good here. I'm a creature of habit. This is kind of my spot. And that's one of your choices too, right?
If I'm
But your
empowered to do that,
choice,
if I'm
right?
given the agency, and that's the change management, the behavioral portion of this.
Yes. Yes, and your ability to want to sit in the same spot every day should not mean that every other person has to, and vice versa. My ability to want to sit in a different spot should not mean I'm forcing you to have to do that too, right? So when we create smaller neighborhoods and we have those choices, you kind of come up with a covenants with your coworkers and you kind of know, oh, that's Kate really likes to sit there. So we're going to let Kate sit there and that's her spot. Yeah, we're all good with that. That's cool because we can go do our own thing, right?
Yeah.
And so we then can find spaces that are better suited to our needs where we're not going to be distracted or overwhelmed or irritated or agitated as much because you had that agency to choose.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the old story of the thermostat on the wall. They put a thermostat on a wall that wasn't connected to anything. And as long as people felt like they were changing it and they
Yeah.
were happy, they were warmer.
I think it's funny that we talk about flexibility so much in our industry too. It's like everybody wants everything to be flexible. I want the walls to be flexible. I want the furniture to be flexible. But the only thing that is truly flexible in any space is us. We're the only thing that has legs. But we want to sit in one spot like a potted plant and never move and have everything move around us. And it's like, are we really that lazy? Right. And if you think about this, most people live what we talk about free choice every day. It's like I'm taking you out of a one-room efficiency apartment and I'm putting you in a single family home. You're not brushing your teeth in the kitchen sink because there's a space that you go and do that, right? If you're studying, you go in the den. I mean, I remember one day I was in the living room watching something and my son came over and he's like, hey, can you turn on the TV? I'm trying to study. And I said, no, there's another room in the house that you can go do that in that space, right? Like this is a space that's more social.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of concept in the office space and the shared spaces.
When you looked at the different ways people were working, I know that you've also come up with a kind of a framework for, what was
Yeah.
it, 6 different environments.
So, yeah, modalities of work. The book has multiple chapters, and in some chapters, it's, like a designer's delight. In other chapters, it's an occupational therapist's delight. In other chapter, there's something I think for everybody because we kind of have to cover the gamut. But we took all of the stuff that we did on workplace, and this is really all that research we've done on workplace and all the stuff we've done on neurodiversity kind of combines together to create more holistic solutions. And so this is kind of, what we know people are either concentrating or contemplating or refreshing. They're doing that communal work, that shared, we're in a studio together, but I'm doing my thing, you're doing yours, alone together. We're doing create, congregate, and social. And different industries or different companies they might need more create space. Somebody else might need more concentrate space. So it has to be tailored to what your people are actually doing in your industry. And then we want to try to create hyper and hypo sensitive spaces. So like, if I think about that concentrate space, a phone booth might be great for someone that needs to like black out the visual stimulation or the sound, but someone who is hyposensitive may not want to be boxed in and they just want to be able to sit off to the side. And if you think about it, if in a space where every workstation is exactly the same, you have no way of telling somebody whether they can interrupt you or not. And so when you have a variety, it actually enables permission signaling where if somebody is sitting off to the side, they're kind of telling you, I don't want to be bothered right now. I'm doing something by myself. But if they're choosing to sit right in the middle, then that's an open invitation to come again. We figured this out years ago in a bar, right? You stand at the middle on a high top table. If you want to interact, you sit in a booth in the back if you don't. And it's the same concept that we can bring into the office to help empower people to find those right spots and to signal their level of engagement.
Let's shift a little and talk about technology. I've known Modo Labs, our sponsor, for quite some time, many years. And one of the things I like about it is that they remove the friction. I mean, that's the whole idea. Give me a single pane of glass that allows me to interact with my environment. What kinds of technologies are you seeing? What kind of technologies do you think provide hope that might help with some of these issues?
I think there's a lot of ways. I think what people don't like about going into some of these new environments, it's like, yeah, but how do I know how to find this person, right? And so, or how do I know what's open or not open, et cetera. A lot of times these systems can really help alert people not only to the types of situations that are available or the spaces that are available, but where they are, where they might be open, how you can find them, those environmental things. If you feel like I really have to have this meeting, I don't want to, have to guess, you could reserve it. People don't show up, you can set it up. You can set it free. And I'll just give you a perfect example, I think, of what we have always found. There's, people talk about not having enough data. I'm going to actually say that in many cases, people have too much data. They don't know what to do with it, or it's a single source of data, which makes it thin data. What you really want is thick data. Okay, so thin data. We get called in because people need more conference rooms because all the conference rooms are booked. Then we get there, we walk around on site and we see all these rooms are empty, or there's one person in a conference room for 10 people. You don't have a conference room problem. You have a booking problem. People are booking things and not showing up, or people are misusing a space because you don't have enough of the right size of meeting spaces, or you don't have quiet spaces, right? And so if I just went on the booking information, like, from like Outlook or whatever, it would tell me I need a lot more conferences. But when you have a smart system that can really tell you what's going on, it can help with a variety of things. It can free it up. It can help prepare those spaces. It can tell you which spaces were used and you need to be cleaned versus, nobody ever went here, so don't bother cleaning that room today. Focus on the one that had like 20 meetings in it, right? There's a whole variety of ways that we can kind of reduce the friction and empower people to make better, smarter decisions.
I'm just fascinated with where the technology is going to take us. And we're going to bring Andrea back on now to dig a little bit deeper in the technology. But before we do that, where can people buy your book, Kay?
It's actually a really good question, Kay.
And what's the name of it again?
Yeah, it's Designing Neuroinclusive Workplaces. And you can go on Amazon, you can go on Books a Million, you can go to Barnes and Noble, any of those great places. But you can also go to www.inclusiveworkplaces.design, and that'll take you to multiple locations where you can get the book.
And if they want to reach you for all of your great advice?
Oh, that's easy. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I'm often going off on a variety of topics, or at Kay Sargent, K.Sargent at HOK.com.
Terrific. Okay, Andrea, let's hear it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Kate. I was just actually thinking while you guys were chatting, when it comes to companies that are trying to enable this hybrid style of work and give their employees choice, I think of room and desk booking systems or mobile apps that have room and desk booking capabilities. And it struck me, is there a way to start? I don't know if tagging is the right word, but putting in criteria or labels or something within these technologies to indicate what type of space it is. Because oftentimes the information that's inputted is it has a window, it has maybe two, it's this workstation that has dual monitors,
Yeah.
it's in this neighborhood, etc. But when you think about those other spatial requirements, I'm wondering how you can start surfacing that type of information in technology or desk and room booking
Thermal
systems.
and noise and that kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Right. Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before as well. I think we have the ability right now to be much more sophisticated than, hey, there's just a box, on a plan. Do you want to sit there? Right? I think what people want to know is there going to be glare? Is it close to a window? What is the temperature? What's the sound level? And we have the ability to do all of that. But I also think we go back to the fact that I think a lot of people have very poor sensory intelligence about what their needs are. And so we actually have been working with some folks, sensory intelligence to name one that we talk a lot about in the book, that has created this sensory matrix to help people have a better understanding of what your own needs are. So we could basically say, can you give us your sensory profile or your environmental profile of what would be optimal for you? And then it could say, again, Andrea, welcome to the space. We know that you like dimly lit, dark, loud spaces or quiet spaces or whatever that is that you like, and it can help direct you because those sensors are collecting all of that information. They're collecting, lighting level, sound levels, density level of how busy a space are. If they feed that in and they marry that to us, then it empowers us to make better decisions much more quickly that might be more optimal for us. I mean, how many times have you sat there and watched somebody sit in a space that is clearly annoyed by something that is going on if they refuse to get up and move? And part
Right.
of it is either they don't feel like they are enabled. Kate, this goes back to change management, which you talked about, or they don't know where. Is there a better space someplace else, or is this it? Right. And
Well,
so I
why
think we
don't they
need to
move?
address, yes, exactly.
I'm
We
staying
need
here.
to address those things. I had a great conversation with a client recently who said somebody told us that the space was too loud and he wanted to sit in a private office. So they accommodated him and they moved him into a private office. About a week later, he came and said, I don't like sitting in here. Like, I feel like everybody's staring at me. Can we put film on the glass? And they're like, all right, fine, we'll put film on the glass. So they did. About a week later, he comes back and he's like, I feel really isolated from everybody. And there's like really stuffy in that space. There's no airflow and blah, 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 blah. And finally, they were just like, okay, what is your issue? He goes, well, the guy sitting next to me is so loud. And they're like, then move. Like, we didn't have to do all of this. And I think sometimes it's just about asking better questions too.
Yeah. And I mean, when it comes to that, I mean, I love these use cases you're giving with technology and mobile apps and having essentially this like smart connected workplace
Yeah.
ecosystem. But a lot of these challenges that do impact everyone. When it comes to the big scheme of like organizational practices, they tend to fall off the to-do list, like focused more on reducing corporate real estate or optimizing, human capital. So how do you put forward some small wins for organizations?
I love the fact that everybody talks about how expensive corporate real estate is. And it's not cheap. I'm going to be honest. But let's human capital is 80% of most people's cost. It used to be that IT was 10 and real estate was the other 10. IT has now eclipsed just slightly the real estate cost. So in the big picture of things, if I do anything to negatively impact the people in the space, or I don't address what is bothering them, I'm going to cost that company far more money than if I adjusted it and made it right. Most adjustments, 56% cost nothing. 30-some% are a one-time cost of $300 or less. And even that, I don't think is the right question. The right question you should be asking is, what is it costing me not to address these problems in well-being, manpower, lost hours, lost productivity? And there is no one better at calculating that than my dear friend Kate.
I was just about to throw out some numbers.
I know. I saw you. I saw you like I'm gonna, because people say, oh, you can't measure that. You can. You absolutely can, and we just don't.
We measure the friction. If people lose 10 minutes a day because of whatever, too hot, too cold, too noisy, too crowded, that's the equivalent of their annual office expense. I just don't understand why we haven't dealt with this earlier.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and I think we need to understand it a little bit more. We want to maximize people, and especially if you want people to come in and be happy and satisfied. If people are coming in and they're frustrated and irritated, they're out of there because they now realize there is a viable alternative. There is.
When it comes to more abstract concepts like, let's say, AI, does the neurodiverse community tend to embrace something like that, or is there a fear of the unknown? I know just with, many organizations, people are a little scared of change and a little scared of embracing it, but how can we ease uncertainties for organizations and people around AI in the workplace?
And we started doing a bunch of research on this about 10 years ago. And at that time, people weren't really ready for it, so we kind of put it on hold a little bit. Now it's get it back with a vengeance. But what we found is that there's certain people that are really excited about the potential of artificial intelligence and others that are very cautious. And it's like, okay, well, how can both of these be? And ultimately, it came down to people that were really excited about it were thinking 5, 6, maybe 10 years out. People that were really apprehensive about it were thinking 30, 40 years down the line. Where does this ultimately go? And what does that mean for us? And Stephen Hawkins once said something, I'm paraphrasing here, something like, our future is a race between how quickly technology is advancing and the wisdom of which we choose to use it. I think technology is running us right now. We're not running it. I think there's a lot of things that are happening that we aren't necessarily intentionally doing, but it's like, oh, well, we can do this. Let's go. And we're not necessarily thinking the ramifications. I will say that for the neurodiverse community, it's a double-edged sword. It can be very, very beneficial in many regards. It can provide coaching. It can help break things down. Closed captioning has helped all of us, with all our foreign movies, et cetera, or even, I don't know, the different dialects, being able to see something instead of just hearing it. But at the same time, technology is becoming the biggest distraction today for many people. It's actually eclipsed sound, right? You're disrupted more by your technology going off than you are by sound. But we tend to forgive that somehow. I don't know why, but we do. And I think it's a balance. So I think it is equally impacting neurodivergence and neurotypical individuals. It's impacting all of us.
Hey, you mentioned earlier something about trust that stuck out to me. And I think about like we're talking about more technology being introduced and data streams being siloed. When it comes to maybe introducing more technology like a workplace app or other systems that are supposed to help in the workplace, how do you sort of use that narrative to build trust back with employees? Like, how can organizations start to use technology to kind of build that trust gap that kind of exists these days?
Again, it goes back to the what's in it for me. First thing is going to be the fear of what's going to happen to me. And so there always has to be the why are we doing this? Understanding why you're making this change. And then what's it going to mean to me? and what's it going to do for me? And if you can give them the what's it going to do for me, and really show them, hey, this is going to make your day easier. This is going to make your job easier. This is going to make your life easier. We can I know this would freak people, but we can anticipate what you're going to want for lunch and order it for you. That's fine with me. I mean, I would love to take that kind of decision away. But I really think that's what it comes down to.
One final question for you, Kay, just kind of like thinking backwards. I mean, you're referencing a technology example from 10 years ago, but thinking sort of backwards, like if we could go back and re-engineer, let's say workplace apps or whatnot, like what would be like a tip to like engineers and coders to make the technology itself maybe more neuro-inclusive? Like, are there some wins there?
Yeah, I think if you think about how long we have had light sensors, motion sensors, we've had photometric sensors, a lot of the technology has been focused around the building or the physical space, the environment, right? I think what we need to focus more on is the employee experience, the human experience. And let's just pick up on what Kate said. If I'm starting to get overheated and I'm feeling more groggy because I'm getting overheated, right? Maybe my app is telling me, hey, you might want to think about going and sitting someplace else where it's a little bit cooler or whatever. Or if I'm squinting a lot and I'm starting to get a headache because like the glare coming in is too bright, but I refuse to move because I'm just being stubborn, right? There are lots of ways that technology can intelligently nudge us to
Mm.
address some of things that will make us happier, healthier, and more engaged because we are just so used to sucking it up. Again, let's go back to that conference room with the jackhammer right next door, where for 20 minutes nobody said a word. We just are used to it, and we're dealing with a lot of things that we don't necessarily need to suffer through. And then I think you get nudged a few times, you start to realize, wow, this really was better. It was just as simple as getting up and moving.
Kate, did you have any last thoughts, final thoughts?
We could talk for hours, Kate, about
Yeah.
about all these crazy things that we're seeing.
Particularly Oreos.
Yeah, yeah, we barely touched on Oreos, but we'll save that for another
We'll save
podcast.
that for another one.
Yeah.
No,
Um,
as Kay says, I think you could just go on for hours. And I think
yeah,
the opportunities in the future, if we use them right, will really make life easier for everybody. And I think
yeah,
that's what's right.
yeah. I would say I think all of us kind of agree that the spaces that we design, we believe have a positive impact on individuals, but we also then have to acknowledge that if we're not doing it well and we're not leveraging all the information and knowledge that we have and being as inclusive as possible, then we could negatively be impacting people. And for us, that's not a choice. It's not an option. We have to do better and we have to create spaces where all can thrive.
Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you for writing this book, Kay.
Yeah. Well, thank
I
you.
didn't want, this is the book I never wanted to write, but we had to, so we were asked to, so we did.
Thank you so much, Kay and Kate, for sharing your incredible insights today. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I hope everybody was able to take something away from the conversation and that it sparked new ideas and perspectives on how to create better, more inclusive workplaces for everyone. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of today's session shortly, so keep an eye on your inbox. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, we're flashing our contact information on the screen right now, so we'd love to hear from you. And on behalf of the entire Modo team, thanks again for spending time with us today. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.